those things were set kind of the tone at that time for Japan to be a leader in various technologies. That kind of programmatic push has disappeared over the last 30 years, but is back again. So the government has come out with a strong view on innovation in Japan. We're going to do it through stimulating startups. The government has set up a program to get 50 to 100,000 startups to come online, and they also hope to get out of that 100 unicorns.
Welcome, everybody. The fintech revolution or evolution is clearly a global trend, and we are all excited whether we are in finance or not. The economy is affected by this evolution, the digital transformation. And today I have the pleasure to have with us Pieter Franken, who is an amazing personality in banking, in fintech, in technology. He is not only the co-founder of Elevandi Japan and the Japan Fintech Festival that took place recently. He has been in the industry, our industry, at major banks, Citigroup, Union Digital Bank, Shinsei Bank, and has been involved in innovation and digital transformation for a long time. Welcome, Pieter.
Yes, and Effie, welcome. It's a wonderful opportunity to be on your show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm based in Europe, and I typically look at the West, right? The big capital markets, but also emerging markets. I have a passion because of my earlier career was very much involved in emerging markets. There's a lot of innovation, as you know, in these regions and countries for the obvious reasons. I've never visited Japan, and there's a lot to talk about. And I reached out to you because of the recent FinTech Festival. And I want to start from getting a sense from you of where is the state or the pulse of digital transformation in the Japanese economy, both on the consumer side and on the business side. I know from recent reports that Japan remains a cash-heavy economy. We know that it is an old, in terms of demographics, economy. I know that credit cards are still heavily used, but give us a broader sense, please.
Yes, so it's a very important question. And as you mentioned, Japan still has a high level of uses of cash, but that's not the only paper that is popular. Ordinary paper is also still very much loved by Japan. So a lot of operations and daily activities still involve a lot of paper. So if you go in Europe today, it's rare to use cash, and it is rare to get a receipt. Everything is basically done electronically. In Japan, we're actually still far away from that moment. It's not been unnoticed, and there's a lot of connections elsewhere in Japan. Japan was a very early innovator in the financial space. And we were just talking before the show a little bit about our past and our early days. But when I started in Japan more than 30 years ago, Japan was one of the leading countries in terms of automation of funds transfer, automatic debit for utility payments. All these things were there. And then Japan was invented the contactless card, the Felica card. It was almost going for world dominance on internet browsing on your mobile phone with iMode. But a lot of those things didn't materialize and kind of left Japan with, in a state that is very much what it was 30 years ago, right? So, and that this not only applies to the financial payments and transaction handling, it also has a lot to do with how banks and large corporations have actually adopted technology internally, right? So if you go to the Toyotas of Japan, you'll find extreme high levels of technology, automation, robots, and all of that stuff. But if you go into the service sector, it's the opposite. You'll find a tremendous amount of people with paper, using shops to sign things, and so forth and so forth. So, and this was kind of highlighted during the COVID days. You probably remember the news that Japan was still struggling with COVID because it was doing business through fax machines. and it was still using floppy disks and things that, even your children don't know what they were anymore, are still heavily in use here. So that digitization is a big challenge for Japan, also a big opportunity. And I think in 2000, just 2-3 years ago, the government set up a special ministry called the Digital Agency, tasked with attacking the digitization of the government. And with that, of course, it will trickle through many parts of the industry here. But yeah, digitization is still a very big issue. On the money side, as you mentioned, cash usage is still very much king. There has been a change in that over COVID. Things have picked up, but it is still a far cry. And though there are more transactions done wirelessly, contactlessly, most of those transactions tend to be very small in nature. And there's still a gap where larger amounts are involved, or where people want to keep larger amounts on their phone. We're still away from that. So government is actively pushing it, but the acceptance and Japanese have still very much like the convenience of cash. And I think it will take some time before all of that is really, really addressed.
Peter, it feels to me like an oxymoron. Being here in Europe, I know that Line is a super app that was born in Japan and from what I know has been exported, so to speak, to some Asian countries.
Yes.
Rakuten is known, to be a major, a giant in e-commerce. So in general, I would say Japan is clearly an export economy. I believe it's the fourth global export economy
Right.
after the US, China, and Germany. So is Japan exporting fintech to Asia, but not using it
Right.
locally? Can
Uh,
you say that?
so I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but Japan has been very strong in exporting things, but has not been so strong in exporting virtual things. And if you look at, you mentioned PayPay, what's important to notice is that the PayPay system actually originated through Paytm, the Indian leader in payments in India. Then we have a Line. Line, yes, originated partly in Japan, but also partly in Korea. And it has two legs, so to speak, to stand on. And those are also the two most important markets for Line. It really didn't go very much way beyond that. In Asia, WhatsApp and a few others, specifically WhatsApp and Facebook, are the main communication platform. And then Rakuten and others, there's many other companies like Rakuten here that have all kind of spun off their own payment version, right? So you have RakuPay, but you also have Mercari Pay, MariPay, and so on. And so what has happened is specifically accelerated over COVID, there has been a kind of a wild grow of payment options. So if you go to a convenience store and you want to pay for a piece of bread, you'll get an option of like 20 to 30 logos that allow you to pay with. On one side, it's great that merchants can accept all those various forms of payment, but the reality is that the fragmentation has not really helped the adoption. So it is, and that's the difference with Europe. Europe has kind of more or less top down started to mandate that banks shall be open, and open banking standards and so forth and so forth has led to that it is really easy to pay anywhere in Europe. And there is, it just works. You don't have to really worry too much about, if you're a European citizen, so to speak, with a European bank card. It just works wherever you go, right? And so, including chip cards and what have you. So in Japan, chip cards are still being rolled out as we speak, and there's still a lot of old stuff out there. So that kind of proliferation of these various companies that on one hand sound great has led to that kind of diversification, and therefore it's been hard to export, right? So if you are not the number one in Japan, how can you export it elsewhere? And literally, if you look around, there's been not a lot of successful fintech exports from Japan. Now, to be really honest, if you look at the fintech world at large, there are some fintechs that have successfully things done across border, but a lot of fintechs are focused on the domestic markets, or the European market, the US market, Japan market, China market, etc., because the regulations put kind of fences around these that kind of drive different solutions in different markets. The only thing we can currently see right now is that kind of, ironically, Japan is the land that invented contactless wireless cards. Amazing technology. If you go here by train, it is extremely efficiently done. It's there for 30 years, right? But now the Japanese government, and including a lot of payment processors around Asia and Europe as well, are starting to talk about QR code kind of unification. And the QR code originally was invented actually by Japanese researchers as well, but it's not kind of what Japan was looking forward to, right? So kind of the intellectual property of these things are not really Japanese. The companies that are strong at them are not Japanese either. So I think in terms of, you look at, what has Japan done to export this, I think they've exported a lot of kind of core technology ideas like QR codes and Felica chips, etc. But they didn't become world leader with that. The likes of Apple and Google and others really took, or Alipay and so forth, really took it to the next level. And so that's kind of the pity of Japan. And I think it has a little bit also to do with the government stance being not too top down. It leaves things to the public sector, which, on one hand side, that's good. But on the other hand side, for the public good has led to a lot of too many options, maybe in my mind, to make payments rather than say, let's focus on a standard that works in Japan and maybe across Asia. So there's not the end of it. There's still a lot of work happening. And I think the private sector in Japan is very active. And, maybe we'll see a strong winner emerging over time that can kind of streamline this over time. And don't forget that, removing cash removes actually a lot of overhead from the system. But if you then replace it by a lot of fragmentation, you're not really creating a lot of efficiency either.
Yes. I mean, it's the question that I'm a bit cynical about getting rid of old intermediaries and introducing new intermediaries. And it's natural to happen in the beginning. I'm cynical about, a lot of what's happening right now with stable coins and digital assets. And we are introducing new intermediaries. And the question then becomes, what have we improved? Who are the rents lower, and so on. So it's not black and white like with everything. Peter, I want to go back to the festival, the Japan Festival that took place in March, and ask you, what were the big ideas, the big takeaways? What were the focus or the excitement there that you can share with us from that event?
Yes. So first of all, I think the big excitement, and I think all the people that were lucky to attend will share is that kind of Japan is back feeling, right? So we have kind of gone through not the lost decade, but 3 lost decades. When I came to Japan, was the peak of the bubble economy, but most of my being here was during so-called the lost decades. And Japan is back in multiple ways. And we talked quite a bit about that at the festival. We're also going to release some of our views on that through our Future Matters vehicle. But what is key is that the Japanese government has kind of taken a more involved approach into the innovation speed in Japan. I think that makes a lot of sense. When I came to Japan, Japanese government was actively promoting the growth of the industry through a tremendous amount of low interest lending and other programs. For example, the 5th generation computing project was a project actually I was participating under. And those things were set kind of the tone at that time for Japan to be a leader in various technologies. That kind of programmatic push has disappeared over the last 30 years, but is back again. So the government has come out with a strong view on innovation in Japan. We're going to do it through stimulating startups, right? So if you look at the 70s and 80s, the innovation was stimulated by building big global companies, but they have kind of progressed in a way where they're not really the big innovators anymore, right? Sony Walkman, we all know about it, but it's now a 40-year-old story, or 30-year-old story. But what happened since, right? So I think there's a clear view that startups and the entrepreneurial spirits in Japan need to be stimulated more than anything else. So the government has set up a program to get 50 to 100,000 startups to come online, and they also hope to get out of that 100 unicorns, right? Now, you can debate if these numbers are realistic or if these numbers make sense or not, but they're big enough numbers that you can't get there by not doing something dramatically different. And so there's a lot of financial support that is coming in. A lot of things are happening. Japan also wants to become a global financial center again. And so all these things are starting to kind of create an excitement around Japan. We also saw a lot of investors that came to the FinTech Festival that are very, very keen to learn how to invest in Japan. And we see recently more and more signs. I think Microsoft recently announced a major investment in AI in Japan in the billions of dollars and so forth, really kind of indicating that uh, people are starting to recognize that Japan has a bigger role to play and so forth. And I think Japan also would love to play that role. So I think that is kind of a number one excitement of the Japan Fintech Festival. And also the reason why we actually started it was it's kind of the time is now for Japan to rise from the lost decades and take more visible leadership in innovation, but also, of course, in the financial industry and maybe with that fintech. So I think that was one. The other things were I would say less surprising because the global trends are also very much important for Japan. But we focused on, of course, on artificial intelligence. We also focused on asset management, and that's a big theme for Japan to attract more asset managers to come to Japan. As you mentioned, Japan is the fourth exporting country, but is also one of the most wealthiest countries in the world with a tremendous amount of assets and wealth to be managed better. So I think the government is actively trying to promote foreign asset managers to come to Japan for that. We also spoke a bit about, of course, about digital assets. I think that's also a thing that people are getting more excited about in the sense that Japan was kind of forward-looking by regulating digital assets early on. You can debate if the regulations are this or that, but it creates important clarity for fintechs to come and investors to come together, right? As opposed to the US where things have taken time and things are starting to maybe take
Do I
understand
correctly,
yes.
Peter, that banks there are compliant in issuing stable coins, and I've been seeing some headlines with interest in pilots for issuing stable coins?
Yes. So the regulations have basically been put in place for almost all these different types of digital assets, including things like tokenizations and NFTs and so forth. So it creates clarity, including banks being able to participate local fintechs, but also global fintechs can come in and be part of that. And so I think that is interesting. It creates, I think, a clearer incentive for innovation to happen in Japan. At the same time, we must make it clear, though, that the regulations are kind of restrictive in terms of having foreign participation come in. You need to follow all the Japanese rules. Fair enough, everybody needs to follow the same rules, but it means with Japanese language and Japanese practice, etc., there's maybe a little bit of a challenge. But I think as things progress and these technologies starting to become more mainstream, we're now seeing it with ETFs, but we're also seeing more and more momentum building up around tokenization. I think these things are going to be interesting fields for Japan as well.
Peter, you are an entrepreneur at heart. You are a techie at heart, right? This is your background, despite your extensive business experience. What are you excited about? What are you involved in the innovation space?
I think there's a few things I'm excited about. If you look at fintech and what you can do with it, one thing is we can automate things. I think what is way more exciting is we can create new digital economies. And we can also create new growth opportunities in that as well. So if you look at the kind of the dialogue recently around AI and going digital, it sometimes has been kind of negative in the sense that, this is going to replace a lot of jobs. And probably it will, but it also will create new opportunities and new jobs and new things to do as well. I think being in Asia and being part of Asia creates a very different backdrop to that. Asia is growing. It has the youngest population on our planet. And it creates, with that, there's still a lot of poverty and people are not financially being included. But that actually creates a huge opportunity for technology to leapfrog in those societies. And that's something I'm personally also very much interested in and involved with, is how can we bring technologies that we have to the lowest denominator and start enabling growth in economies that are rising, and also start to connect things. And I think larger players can play an important role, but I think fintech and smaller players can equally play an important role of bringing those things together. So that's one thing I'm excited about. The other thing is, of course, artificial intelligence. I briefly mentioned before we started that I started my life as an AI researcher. Before it was kind of called AI, it's kind of knowledge engineering, but that's my humble beginnings in the late 80s. And from there, it has been a very long journey. And of course, the internet created a major ramp for AI to start to move to where we are today. And now with big data and LLMs and all these newer technologies, combined with existing techniques that have been developed over the years, has really come together in a way where we can do things that we really weren't there 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. right? So when I went through my career and trying to automate things, we did it more in the knowledge engineering way of things, and like if this, then that, and so forth. And slowly but steadily, we got the capabilities of translating text to speech, recognize certain patterns. We were able to recognize signatures, and all these things slowly started to build up in the financial industry to better automation. And now I think we're on an even bigger leapfrog in terms of what can be done with artificial intelligence. What is also exciting about it is, of course, with all new technologies comes challenges. And a lot of people don't realize that having the core technology doesn't mean that you can easily or immediately deploy it. You have to deploy it in the context. And that context typically means actually more work. Sometimes I explain to people that when they see an app, and they says, Peter, what's so special about banking? It's just an app. I say, yeah, an app is 5% of the iceberg that you don't see, because behind it is tremendous amount of stuff to make that all happen in a way that is secure, accountable, and so forth and so forth. And it's the same thing with AI. I think we're going to see that AI will require supporting technologies to be effectively deployed in specifically regulated industries, but any industry. We're already kind of seeing some of those discussions happen. But I think that will be, from a techie viewpoint, of course, really interesting. How do we control the beast, so to speak, to make it more usable and so forth, and also don't do no harm is a very important part of making things
do no
successful.
harm and also create value, because if we're using these tools and everybody can use them and it becomes the norm, then there's no moat. So how, we're just now starting to imagine what are the use cases in terms of a sustainable business,
Yes.
or sustainable capabilities that are also secure and compliant, depending on where they are.
And then we're part of societies, and societies bring ethical values, and all these things will have an impact on how technology gets applied, right? And I think specifically has elements where where people say, well, where do we draw certain boundaries as to what it can and cannot do? But that creates a lot of technical challenges as well, and I think that's makes it even more exciting.
Exactly. It makes it even more exciting. We're having discussions about issues that we would never discuss before, whether it's rethinking what is value and what is an asset, or what is money, and where is creativity and the value that people bring, especially in services sectors, as you pointed out. Peter, I want to thank you very much for these insights. I'm always fascinated how different economies and different societies have, not only because of their DNA, they bring different challenges, but also, as you said, they may be able to solve for problems in a very different way, and the society can benefit. Before we close, I want to ask you a more personal question. What are you reading these days, or what are you fascinated and curious about?
Very good question. One of my challenges is that I do quite a few things, so the time for sitting in a corner and reading is actually somewhat limited. But I'm kind of fascinated recently by how the Japanese economy is changing, and there are two camps. We have people that are saying Japan is back and this is great, and other people say, why would it be different this time? And there's a great book written by Richard Katz about the re-emergence of entrepreneurship in Japan, that kind of puts a balance between the two sides, and also gives a great, wonderful historical background to that as well. I think that's a great book that I recently have been reading, and also historically goes back, and then you project back to today, because you are here because of a lot of things that happened in the past in Japan. Definitely, if you want to understand what happens in Japan, you will have to understand how things happen up to now, because there's a lot of relationships there. I do think that Japan does have a unique opportunity to be back. Of course, things need to happen to get there. And I think with the Japan Fintech Festival, we have kind of opened the door on both sides to really bring the global community and the Japan innovations community together in a very unique way that has never done before. And we hope that we can further stimulate the various dialogues between all the stakeholders to kind of start to deliver on some of the things that people have been talking about.
Do I understand correctly that the festival actually took place in a venue that is historical for Japan?
Yes, very much so. The festival was held at the 1300-year-old shrine in the center of Tokyo, very auspicious place. The shrine is dedicated to the success in business. The name of the shrine is Kanda Myojin. If you're coming to Tokyo, I would highly recommend you visit. It's a beautiful structure. But it's also, interestingly enough, the head priest was very forward-looking and decided to build a conference center inside the shrine, allowing people to have their conferences there, and also through that get some of the the blessings of the shrine and success for their businesses. So we thought it was a unique opportunity to do to bring people together in a different feeling and atmosphere, and I think it worked really well for all the people that came. It kind of created kind of an excitement, but also kind of like you're in a different place, right? So if you travel, you may have that. You were talking about you were going to all these conferences, but if you wouldn't know where you are, you would probably think you could have been anywhere. I mean, everything looks the same, and
Like the
right,
intercontinental breakfast, it's
right,
an
beautiful. Yeah,
intercontinental
you
environment,
could,
right?
it's hard to figure out if you're in Paris or Tokyo or New York these days if you go to these shows. And I thought we felt that if you come all the way to Tokyo and you sit there and say, how do you know you're in Tokyo? It's kind of a disappointment, specifically if there's such a rich cultural backdrop to benefit from. So we thought that would be a great way to start the FinTech Festival. Next year, we're going to do FinTech Festival from March 3rd to 7th. It's the same week. And it's going to be part of the Japan FSA's Japan Fintech Week again. And we're not saying anything yet, but we're working very hard to make it as interesting and even more exciting than this year. And so for that, if you have not come, please do come to the FinTech Festival. If you have been, what I'm talking about, and we know that a lot of people already have blocked the week in their schedules. We hope to bring together more ecosystems, more people, more discussions to the States than we had this year, and also broaden the scope of the festival to include more financial infrastructure, which is something Japan actually, unknowingly is very strong at. So we want to bring some spotlights on that part of the industry as well.
Thank you very much, Pieter, for your insights.
And if you thank you so much, and look forward to see you.